Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to episode 51 of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. I feel like I'm going to say it 50 every time. So I am your host, Jake Metzger, as well as my illustrious co-host, the guy who's willing to drive all night to get here. And he's somebody that, man, ooh, he sure is something beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, David Reed.
I have to say, Jake, that you got me all wrong.
No?
I'm in fact not willing to drive all night to get anywhere.
To get anywhere. Even if it was to record this podcast. That's a hard choice, let's be real. I would debate too. Drive all night, especially if you got work or something. It's a long time to drive all night. But how are you doing, David?
Doing good. I'm doing good.
Good. I'm excited to talk about our another peak analysis, and inside another peak analysis episode of the Snarp Fangle Saga. And let me tell you, we got ourselves a good one here. Last week, if you weren't aware, was episode 50, and we decided to do peak analysis on The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And me and Dave, this was David's idea. He said, "Okay, I'll pick this album, and you pick an album as well." And I said, "Oh, okay, cool. And next week we might have another one. We'll see. We'll see." But I am excited to talk about it. It's the album's called Out of Body by Need to Breathe. And before we continue any further, for all comments, concerns, hate mail, and what your favorite band of all time is, send them over with a hop, skip, and jump over to snarpfanglepod@gmail.com. David, let's get into it. Need to Breathe.
Need to
Breathe. And their album Out of Body, their 8th studio album. It's an interesting album, I'll say. I have a personal connection to this album, which is why I picked it. And in my opinion, just from analyzing it, from lyrically, and just going through every song, I feel like, for me at least, there's something great to be found in every single song. And it's really, it's quite fascinating too. It's not only their 8th album, but it's the first album. There was 2 brothers, Nathan and William Reinhardt. William goes by Bear, who's the main lead for Need to Breathe. But Bear and Bo would write the songs together. Nathaniel goes by Bo. And it was just really cool because it was the first album that didn't have Bo in it, although he is credited with writing multiple songs on the album. And it's interesting because on last week's episode, when we talked about The Dark Side of the Moon, one of the band members also left that group as well. See, was it Sid Barrett?
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny. I didn't find that out until afterward. But what are your thoughts? I have a whole thing written up to get into, but before, I want to get your thoughts on this album and what your general thoughts are, overview, and what do you think?
Well, where can I start? Let's see. It's an album only a mother could love.
Oh, man.
That was a joke. It came to me, but I got nothing for it, so we'll just leave that right there.
All right.
This album was a difficult ask for me. I don't, it makes several stylistic choices which irritate me.
Okay.
They don't irritate other people, but they irritate me because they're stylistic choices that are quite prevalent in popular music.
Oh, no.
And I have an intense hatred of popular music. Like burning passion.
Vehemently.
So it was a little bit of a difficult listen for me.
Okay.
It makes too many choices that are just hallmarks of music that I absolutely loathe. But I didn't hate it. I did not hate the album.
Okay. Good.
It was
that makes me feel better.
it offered some enjoyment despite it being written for people who like music that I despise.
Yes, very much so. I guess you could count me as one of those people. I don't know. For me, I'm a terrible person to give advice to. or to give advice to you, I should say. Not you, but the you in general, the general you. Because in terms of recommending things, I'm really bad at it because I just like everything, mostly. Mostly. I can find good in a lot of things. Unfortunately, it's a detriment to sometimes. Like last week when we were looking up Dark Side of the Moon, I got distracted looking up like what happened in 1973. And I got distracted by looking up I think it's anyway, it was something that happened in 1973. It was a war. And then randomly, I got recommended on YouTube If I Were a Rich Man from Fiddler on the Roof. And I was like, oh, and it was like, the tagline was, oh, the best version you ever heard. I'm like, you know what? I'll click on it. I'll take this one a gander. And man, was I impressed. The guy who played him, the main character in Fiddler on the Roof, I don't remember his name for the sake of me, but God, he gave such a wonderful performance. And man, I love musicals. And man, there's some really great ones out there, but there's a lot of trash. I think I'll have Lexi on here one day to talk about our love of musicals, which I'm sure you'd love to join in on.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. But anyway, I find there's a lot, like even stupid, crappy stuff, like, not crappy, but stupid stuff that is just stupid with 2 O's, David, like Epic Rap Battles of History. Like, I love the writing and the beats and all that in those, Nice Peter and Epic Lloyd get together and they do that. And even the production design, as amateurish and terrible as it is sometimes and not very good, it's honestly has a lot of heart in it. And that's what I see. And that's something I kind of look for in a lot of media is heart. And I think this album particularly has a lot of that. I'm very biased, to be quite frank. This album I listened to in a very like transitionary period of my life from being like, oh, I'm an adult to, oh, I'm a man. I need to start acting like it. And that period, probably 2020 to 2023, what I would say, is a very hard time of my life, very difficult for myself. But this album kind of got me through it. And I have this thing written here, but I don't know. I think before we get into that, give the audience an example, David. I know they know you very, very well.
Oh, of course.
Super well. It's just exquisitely well, if that's even a term to use. But what's something that's like popular, to give the people context at least, that you don't like, that you just vehemently hate, and compare it to this and what you like about this instead that doesn't in contrast to that.
Let's see.
Are we talking Sabrina Carpenter or?
I mean, there's so many.
There's so many.
There's so many.
Oh, before we go forward, I do want to say, I watched some of the Grammy clips last night. And what's that song? It's like, you're beautiful, beautiful, or whatever. I don't even remember the guy's name, but he performed it live. And the tagline on the tweet.
Are you talking about James Blunt?
Yeah, no. I'm going to have to look it up. It's like Parker. Or maybe it is James. I don't know.
Well, James Blunt was a one-hit wonder guy, and he had that You're Beautiful song. I'm not going to try to sing it because I'm a little...
Yeah,
right now, and also I hate that song.
So there's your James Blunt's. That was in 2007. This is a new guy. It's not James Blunt.
Oh, okay.
Gosh, dang, what was it? If I go through my Twitter account, I'm sure I can find it. But anyway, I've heard the song. If you've listened to the radio at least once in your life or been in public while the radio's playing, you've probably heard it. He performed it live at the Grammys, did a backflip off a piano, which was kind of badass, to be quite honest. However, his voice, I have issues with. And I think that the term giving it his all, in quotes, was adequate, but very, I don't like his voice because it's not, like, it doesn't have that pure feel. You could tell, yeah, he's giving it his all, but it just doesn't sound very pleasant to the ears, I would say. And like, I could get into the song, but there are some issues and I can't stand myself listening to it because of that. So that's where I'm coming from. But
I still don't know what song you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I probably wouldn't like it if I did.
Yeah, so
you can name pretty much any popular song, and there's like a 75% chance that if I've heard it, I'll hate it.
Okay, Well, do you have an example? Well, let's say this. So Need to Breathe did that song Something Beautiful, you know? Speaking of beautiful, let's go to that. You know that song, right?
No.
You don't?
I've...
Something beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard it.
That one.
It took me... I've never intentionally listened to Need to Breathe before listening to this album.
You know what? Save for me for Pink Floyd.
I've never...
But anyway.
I know I've heard some, like a couple of their songs on the radio, but like it was in the background and I don't have any particular memory of what they were.
That. Okay. So,
but yeah, now that you sing the little part, yeah, I know what song you're talking about.
Compare that to this album. Is this album a step up or a step down?
It's less annoying than that song.
Okay, good.
That song is really has all the hallmarks of pop music that I hate. This album has less of them. I mean, it has a few other flaws, but we'll get into that later.
We'll get into that, yeah. I'm very intrigued to see what your critiques are, because I do want to, again, I'm extremely biased for this album. I really love it. It kind of speaks to the young man in you, because when Bear was writing the songs for this album, he intentionally was going out of his way to write something that he would not play for his three sons, but he was inspired by his three young boys. And he said, what would I want to tell them in the future? And that's what this album kind of encapsulates, is through the song Seasons, through the Banks song, through Out of Body itself. There's a lot of really interesting things they're saying lyrically, and that's where I find the most joy out of this album, and most joy out of, I think, every Need to Breathe album in general, in terms of the level of writing is really, it's very interesting, the writing, I would say. Not very good, but in a lot of aspects, but I think there's just something to it that kind of is captivating, I would say, in the way it flows together. But I'd love to get into what your critiques are, just generally.
Yeah, and before we move on,
yeah,
I would like to say too, that kind of clarify that my hatred of pop music and by extension Need to Breathe doesn't come from a place of elitism or thinking no.
David's just a grumpy old man, y'all.
That's I'm all? truly an awful person. But anyway, if somebody you having an emotional connection with this album,
I'm so biased.
I'm not looking down upon that and casting judgment on that.
Yeah.
But so that my critiques of that album have nothing to do with any one particular connection to it. So if they have a connection to it, then that's a great thing. And my critiques of this album are something completely separate from that. I'm not going to try to pull someone's love for pop music into my critique of pop music.
Yes. You've been out of body ever since you were born, basically. Well, I mean, that would go. Yeah, that'd be correct. You've been out of a body ever since you were born. Yeah.
All right.
All of us.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you have acquired tastes, and this is not one you'd go out of your way to listen to, but you did for the podcast, and I thank you for that.
Appreciate it. It's not super horrible. I did enjoy it.
All right.
I did enjoy it.
That makes me feel. That makes me feel so good, David. I'm so happy. Thank you. Okay, let's get into it. So here's what I wrote. I was going through it last night, listening to the album, and we're going to do the same thing we did last week, go track by track. And I wrote notes on all of them. But here's my intro and my kind of backstory with this album, if I may. So here we go. I came into contact with this album at a very penultimate moment of my life. I remember downloading this album to my phone before my shift started when I was working at a restaurant. I came out of that shift really beaten down and weary. It was just a 9 to 2 shift, and it turned to a 9 to 5 shift unexpectedly, and as the day proceeded. I remember getting into my car, picking something to listen to as the sun was making its way down toward the horizon on this late August day. I remember I didn't have to work online that night for my other job, so the evening was free. I was probably going home to play Spider-Man on PS4 or something. But what I do remember is selecting that first track on my phone and turning left down that old valley road. And it was almost a surreal experience. The lyrics mixed with the guitar playing as the drums debuted in accordance. I remember having mixed feelings. I was 23 and was still figuring out where God wanted me to go in my life. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't giving God much thought as I tackled the struggles of life and was figuring out how to live on my own, moving out of my parents' place, providing for myself, wondering what kind of man I want to be as, well, I'm a man now, and what I need to do to prepare for a family. But listening to this song on that ride home was a realization that I am not alone, that the journey is tough, seemingly impossible at times. But with God, all things are possible. And you kind of have to enjoy the journey as you go. Because once you reach Mercy's shore, that's it. So I also wrote down a little bit of trivia here. During an interview with Rudy Blair Entertainment Media, Baron Reinhardt said that going through the 2020 pandemic didn't leave any stone unturned. And he also said, I wrote the most amount of songs during that time than I have had my whole life. Which is really interesting because this came out in August, I want to say...
2020.
It was August 2020, August 29th, 2020. And if you listen to their Live in the Woods Volume 2, they released after this album, it was really pretty much a kind of a second chance at a tour for this album because it was 2020. They weren't allowed to tour. The tour was canceled for this album. And it was also 4 years since they've released their 7th studio album. So during those 4 years, they were writing the songs for this album. Bo, his brother, was going to leave the band, and they switched record labels. So it's like a whole bunch of transitionary stuff. And it makes me wonder what kind of, that's the kind of stuff we know, but it makes me also think what else was going through their minds as they're making this album, as they're recording it, getting it finished. In fact, before they announced Bo was leaving, before the pandemic was about to hit, Bear was on a cruise ship writing, I think it was Banks at the time, or Out of Body, one of those songs. And he said, yeah, I finished signing up. And then 2 weeks later, COVID hit. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And I do kind of share your view, David, about the pop influence on this album and the critique of that. Because compared to Need to Breathe, some of their other stuff, some of it gets down and is like southern drawl, which is really nice. And that's something I appreciate about Bear's voice and some of the songs in this album, but they kind of drifted toward a different direction. And it feels to me more, I don't know what you think, but more, I don't know. This album feels like it was made in the South, like it was, but it also is like, it has a form of authenticity to it. And compared especially the two albums after this one, which do kind of get more poppy, if I'm being honest, this one kind of stands out among them all as kind of special. So anyway, what do you want to get into the track list, Ness, or do you have anything to say before we do that?
Yeah, let's get into the tracks.
All right. First one we got is Mercy's Shore. So I'll go ahead and start here. Track 1, Mercy's Shore. I like the beat.
Mercy Shore.
Yeah.
I listened to this album on YouTube, and there's not a Mercy Shore on there.
What album is it? Can you show me? Let's see.
Out of Body.
Yeah, let me see.
That's the tracks.
Oh, there's one named Mercy Shore that should be on here.
Oh, then the YouTube playlist must not have had that on there.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't like someone randomly that like someone made. It was like, you know, you know how it has like the band names dash topic.
Yeah. It was from that one.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Is there one called Seasons on there?
Seasons, yes.
Okay, there how many tracks total? Like 10?
1,
Or how
2,
many?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, so I think it's just missing Mercy Shore. All right, so let's just go through it one by one really quick. So we got Mercy Shore, which you don't have, Alive, Hang On, Survival, Child Again, Out of Body, Who I Am, Banks, Riding High, Bottom of a Heartbreak, and Seasons. Okay, you just didn't have Mercy Shore. No worries. I guess I'll start out here because you didn't have it in the playlist.
Yeah, I didn't listen to it, so
that's okay.
Well, let's hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So I like the beat. The song is so fun. So the song, I was worried about this, dude. This morning I got up and I'm like, what if David accidentally listens to like Hard Love or some random album from them instead of Out of Body? Like I was like worried that it was going to happen and we were going to start recording, and exactly what you told me, the fear started to creep in, but thankfully.
I made sure. Like, I made sure to write. I made sure to write down the name of the album, like before we even recorded the last week's episode.
Yeah.
I already had that waiting in the wings. In fact, this note on this note page was written like 2 weeks ago, or whenever we came up with the idea, and it just said Out of Body, Need to Breathe until I filled it in as I was listening to it.
Gotcha. Okay. No worries. All right, so I like the beat of this song. The song reaches to the inner parts, I think, of somebody going through a transition. Just by listening to the opening verse, it comes off to me as a person who is on a journey, whether trying to keep their head above water or trudging through or up a mountain. I like the beautiful picture the song portrays, where you are drowning in the waters of life, but at the end, you will reach what the title is referring to. It makes me want to cry. I specifically like the verse, white knuckles and wild horses. I think that line can also be associated with waves in an ocean. The one critique about this song, though, is that the ending lines feel more like a poem and don't necessarily match the rest of the song. It doesn't flow very well. The thought is nice and donates authenticity to the song, but I believe the execution could have been done better. Yeah, there's like this weird ending part where like it's like 6 lines of lyrics, and it's like going through it, and it's kind of just out of tune with the song. It's kind of like inserted at the end, and it feels like it was almost forced in there. Even though it's like it's cool, but it's like weird. I just don't jive with the ending couple verses. But yeah, that's what I think of Mercy Shore, and I think it's a good introductory song compared to Alive, which we'll get into next. So David, what do you think of Alive? Track 2.
Alive. So it was track 1 for me. I was immediately struck by how just upbeat it sounds and how it's kind of catchy, you know. It gets your toe tapping.
Yeah.
And I was also struck by like, wow, this doesn't completely suck. I was really afraid.
Yeah.
I was really afraid going to this album that I was gonna just hate it.
At least I didn't make us listen to like Sean Kingston or something.
Oh God.
Oh man.
But that was like a big thought. I was like, wow, this song is not like utter trash. I was really afraid that I would not be able to derive any enjoyment from this because I hate pop music with a passion.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, it's again, I always look at stuff lyrically. You could ask me anything about the instruments and stuff, and I probably wouldn't be much help. So this is what I wrote down. I said, this song sounds to me like the verse from James 2:17, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. And that's what I really like about this song. It's talking about, hey, just keep going. And it's talking about mostly like, hey, like, why can't we have a childlike faith? Like, like the good chillins, you know? The song is all about running towards your dream, in my opinion, having faith along the way, like a child. As an adult, we do tread carefully because we have learned that if we run too fast downhill, we will fall. But children don't do that. They just bolt, and if they fall, they pick themselves back up. Why can't we do the same as our Father's children and have faith that God will help us up as we run towards our destiny and or dream, a childlike faith, if you will? So, I don't know. I think lyrically, when you look at Need to Breathe, some of it's kind of all over the place. It's a little weird. There's very interesting choices in the way things are formed. But I feel like it does convey to the general theme of the track. And, excuse me, for example, you have of course, the running down Thale Hill thing, but it's very upbeat, like you said, gets the toe tapping, and it's very enjoyable. It doesn't really challenge you in any way, maybe except for the subject matter.
I mean, I wouldn't say anything. I mean, nothing on this album challenged me.
Well, I don't know. I think for me, like, I like, there's people out there like, I like them encouraging music on the K-Love and the Air One and only positivity around here, you know? I'm not like that. I like all kinds of things.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, is this is another thing where the album just, like, loses me. And, like, this isn't to talk down specifically on your connection or anyone else who might have a connection with the lyrics. If you do, that's great and that's fine. So my critiques of it are just for me.
Gotcha.
But I like songs if they're gonna give me some kind of like uplifting, encouraging message. I like songs that will commiserate with me for a little bit before doing so. This album doesn't really do that. It's one track after another of, come on, you can do it, just keep moving forward. I need a song to like sit with me in my misery for a little bit before it encourages me to get up and move on.
Earn your the advice it's going to give you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is like the most upbeat song I think out of them all, honestly. There's Child Again, which is like, I feel like more ethereal, but this song, we can move on from it, honestly. Let's go to track 3, which is Hang On. So I wrote down, honestly, one of the best tracks on the album, the track I'd send folks who've never heard of Need to Breathe to give them a preview. This also happened to be the first single they released to build up the release of Out of Body. This track continues to embody the theme of this album. As the prophet of truth from Halo 2 once said, the great journey waits for no one. So hang on. I especially love the line, all these things take time. It truly is an authentic way of telling people you got to stick with it, growing, learning, recognizing the nuances of life. It all takes time. And that is exactly what I was going through when I heard this song. Figuring out how to manage everything from finances, money, relationships, church. All these challenges came to a head and I had to figure it out. But also to realize that your life's gonna pass you by if you don't appreciate all the wonderful blessings in your life and the little things that need to be brought up in your prayers, staying in a state of grace per se. So I think this song, man, I don't know. It has a very, upbeat, like you can do it title called Hang On. But if you really dive into what they're saying, it's more like appreciating life for what it is, which is the journey. And yes, we're going to eventually get to the end. And some people loathe and, feel miserable about, or some people just don't know. Or some people are happy that they're going to get to the end. And I think that's one thing of beauty about being human. Like we talked about on our 2 robot films when iRobot was being discussed. Like there's something beautiful about being human because it is temporary. But maybe I'm just getting my head in the clouds again. So David, bring me back down to earth as we regale us with your thoughts.
Okay, so my thoughts on this track I like the lyrics in the context of like uplifting, encouraging, you can do it kind of song. If I was looking for that, this would be a good one.
Okay.
I'm usually never looking for that, but if I was looking for that, this would be a good one. I also really like the drumming on this album.
Yeah,
song.
oh man,
it's so good.
It's so good.
Like, there's some moments in here where it's like the musicians got going and it's like, wow, they actually did some interesting things here. And it's so yeah, this one I like the little shuffly parts where it like kind of like slows down and then starts back up again.
Yeah,
very very skillfully executed. Again, gets the toes tapping.
So yeah, I remember. I think this was like the first one I heard on the radio because it was the first one they released. But it was funny because it's a weird choice to also release it after you announce your like co-writer and brother is like leaving the band. So it's like, this is kind of weird, but it's a good song, and I would say that it makes like every time I hear it, it makes me want to sing it, and like especially the "It Takes Time" section of the song toward the end. And man, it's just I also like the lyric. Hang on to your love drunk original reason, which could be, taken many ways, but I feel like it's more referring to like in that moment, you were more like childish and being silly. You're like, oh, that's my dream, but when it gets serious and life throws itself at you toward your way, you're going to forget about it. You're going to look more at reality, but there is a necessity, I think, to keep that childlike faith with you. And that's one thing I just love about this song. And man, it's one of those songs that like you listen to and you're like, man, I need to listen to this while driving a car. 'Cause it sounds good while I drive a car. It makes me, I hear the song. I picture myself driving down the road, the sun's setting, the south wind's blowing. It's mostly cloudy. It's like perfect weather conditions for me and uplifting my mood. And I'm like, it's chaotic. The wind's blowing, but also like there's clouds. So it's like adding something to the atmosphere of today. And it's just beautiful. So anyway, we can move on. And as my alarm on my phone goes off, oh my God. It says nap time, David. I think it's time for me to wake up. All right. So let's go to track 4 or 3 for you, I guess. Survival. Go ahead and hit us, David.
All right, Survival. Let's see. So the little intro was nice. I liked it. It was kind of cool how it like it's kind of cool how it had that little thing and then it kind of faked you out and then launched straight into the song. Like, I kind of like thought, is this gonna be like a quieter one, but then it's like just the intro just stopped and then bam, we're off to the races again. So it was kind of a cool little thing. The male guest vocals.
Drew Holtcrum and his, I think, wife Ellie.
Yeah. His singing kind of reminded me of Josh White a little bit, which is cool. He's writes he writes a lot of different styles of music, but he writes the one that we do in church sometimes. I don't know if are familiar with it. It's called Wounded Healer.
Yeah.
Ooh. So he does that. That's Josh White. So yeah, there's the guest vocals on here kind of reminded me of his voice, which I enjoy. So that was cool. I like the churchy B3 organ,
Yeah.
Add to the gospel feel, but I was like, I didn't like how it faked me out though. With like, there was a part where it was like the organist was like, he was doing his thing, and seemed like it was gonna launch into an epic Hammond B3 solo, and then it didn't.
No, you're talking about toward the end, right? Where after it goes the dun 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 dun, like as it's going through the organ, then it starts, and then Bear comes in, and then the two guests as well, right? You're talking about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it has a little like you can like hear the.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's gonna launch into a cool organ solo, and he doesn't.
Gotcha.
But other than that, it's a pretty good song. The lyrics again, these lyrics just didn't connect with me on this album.
Yeah,
they're written in a way that just doesn't speak to me.
Hmm.
That's another thing that I hate about pop music is the way it's written, the way like most popular songs are written, lyrically they don't speak to me. So I don't really have I don't really have a whole lot to say about the lyrics of this album. So like, we'll just get that out of the way.
I do want to point out, though, to save you from like the commenters out there, that this is very different compared to like. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, that's your opinion on the pop stuff out there, and this is different because this is.
But I mean, it's also not different though. It's not the same as
Are we talking about lyrically?
No. Well, it's not the same as Taylor Swift.
No.
That's so. But there is a strain of popular music that is that this sort of that the writing on this album sort of fits into.
Would you?
And that,
yeah.
And while I'll admit that it's a little bit more, it's more substantive than like Taylor Swift, so I'll give it that. I don't have any criticisms of it in terms of like saying it's bad. But so like if it's your thing, that's cool, and I can appreciate that it would be someone's thing. But for me personally, just this style of writing doesn't really speak to me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I honestly think it's at least more creative than any of Taylor Swift's stuff. Let's be real.
Yeah, no. I'm not.
Let's be real. Like,
I'm not critiquing the creativity of it. I'm not.
It just doesn't connect.
I'm not saying it's bad writing. I'm just saying this particular style of writing fits in line with a strain of popular songwriting that does not speak to me. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Like, again, like Taylor Swift, like the lyrics are cringy and awful.
Oh man, yeah.
And I hate them. I don't hate the lyrics on this album.
Yeah.
They just don't really speak to me.
Yeah, they don't speak to you. Yeah. No, I get you. But I was saying, just for the sake of the audience, like if like comparing it to something like Taylor Swift and it not connecting to you there or here, I totally get. But I want to save you from the commenters because they're going to be like, he put Taylor Swift and NEEDTOBREATHE in the same camp lyrically. And she just talks about her ex-boyfriends, basically. And this is more like, this is something entirely different. Like,
yeah.
This is more like, I don't know.
I bring up Taylor Swift as like an example of what I'm not comparing it to.
Do you mess around with the Monsters and Men band?
I've heard them. I haven't really listened to them a whole lot, but I've heard them. Yes.
You like them or no?
They're okay. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, their lyrics sometimes can be kind of like this, from what I've noticed.
Yeah.
They're more like not folksy. I don't know how to describe them. More, I don't know, like more out. I don't know.
Yeah, they're kind of like indie folk a little bit.
Indie folk. Thank you. Yeah, that would.
I mean.
This is kind of folksy, but different, more mainstream. Definitely more mainstream. Yeah. More like mainstream folk is kind of with a little bit of Southern gospel in there, is what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to go for like mainstream, like indie music whose lyrics I can appreciate better, it would have to be something like Fleet Foxes. Because their songs are very pleasant. And the words sound very pleasant, but then when you actually listen to them, there's like, there's some like not so pleasant themes underneath all the pleasantness. So I can enjoy. That would be an example of a more like kind of indie folk pops lyric style that I can enjoy more because it's got some sort of. It's got like it's the kind of the thing that it's like it's not what it seems at first, whereas this style of writing is what it seems at first.
Gotcha.
Which isn't a bad thing, but that usually doesn't really speak to me.
Okay, I could see that. This is what I wrote down for survival. Give me that good old Southern gospel, because man, that intro rocks. Ooh. This song has all the fixins of the South, like meeting that devil and washing yourself in the river. Just maybe a little bit more mainstream, maybe. The lyrics in this one in particular are very powerful and flow. Oh, man, I wrote extremely well. Now I'm having second thoughts. I would say they flow well, not extremely well. This song reminds me of the Need to Breathe prior to this. This song would fit right into albums like The Heat and The Reckoning, which are definitely less upbeat, I would say. I especially like the verse "Sand" I especially like the verse by the guest artist Drew Colcrum. Like men need a long life to know that they ain't right. Also the verse "I don't have a choice, but I get stuck deciding" also sticks out to me. I feel like those two in particular, with the in context, is pretty like Bear comes in with the first one, like says flowers need sunlight, oceans need high time. Like, okay, yeah, whatever. But then like randomly Drew comes in with like men need a long life to know that they ain't right. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean anything? But I like the duet of the guests and Bear, and I feel like they work really well together. I think that's something I would say about this song, is that it's I think Bear knows how to pick his guests really well in this, because it works really well. I think we'll get to it, but there's another song on here that has, on Spotify at least, there's 12 tracks, and it's like, if I may check here for a second, Who Am I, but they have Ellie King come in. It's like a bonus track. Which I prefer the original with just Bear singing. This one's all right too, but anyway, I like Survival. It's not my favorite track. It's okay, but that southern, that organ, that's some good stuff right there. So, all right, what's next, David? We have number 5, Child Again. Just take it away, David. What do we got?
Let's see. I like the production on this song. There was like a lot of there was just a lot of ambience to it. It wasn't just like the instruments weren't just there. They were they put a lot of echo and stuff on them. So it sounded really lush, like it was happening in like a really cavernous space, almost like a cathedral or something, which I appreciate that kind of a thing. I appreciate a nice ambiance. And it was kind of cool that they actually after the first few songs, I was like, all these songs are so like the same in terms of their like pacing and their tempo. So it was like this one, like there's not very many drums even like through the whole thing. So I was like, something different, some variety. So I appreciated that. And then I also liked how it did like a little mini Dark Side of the Moon thing, and like flowed right into the title track.
Yeah, which I really enjoyed. Oh man. Here's what I wrote down. This track continues the theme from track 2, Alive, being God's children, but what does that truly mean and feel? How does one struggle and comprehend that walk? The processing they use on Bear's voice is a nice touch. It's used multiple times, I'm sure, throughout other songs and maybe more albums, but it really stands out here and works very well in the song, giving an ethereal sensibility, which is echoes on voices and drums. And they're not drums, but the instruments. So I wanted to point out the verse. I know that getting hurt is really how redemption works. And then he says, like, my ego is a ball and chain. My instincts only make it worse. I think this really speaks to me, because I think at the time I was listening to this, I was analyzing like relationships around me and what ego had to do with all of that, ego in other people and in myself included, and how that can just ruin. Ego is really interesting. It takes everything in its own power to ruin just anything you're doing. Anything. Now, sometimes it does fit. It has its place, I'd say, when you're defending things, whether it be your family or whatever, your job, like in a life or death scenario, I would say it has its place. But most of the uses of ego are misused, and it's just something to think about, I feel. So, but man, this song, I don't know what it is. It's like, this is another one that I just sing to And I've heard all these songs so many times at this point. But man, Child Again, like the title's kind of like, okay, I know what I'm going to expect with this song, but I don't know what it is, man. Like, it is different from the others, but man, it's powerful, I feel. It's just really powerful. And like you said, it flows really well into Out of Body, the title theme. And I remember I was listening to this last night and I never really noticed that. I always had like my crossfade on Spotify and blah, blah, blah. And I turned that off since we started Dark Side of the Moon. And honestly, it's not a crazy difference, but it is a difference. And it does bring more to certain albums. And that's one thing I do want to bring up, David. And we could talk about this as we go through this, but the art of the album is missing in the age of streaming and etc. But I feel like with this album, and one reason why I picked it too, is because it does have a theme and it sticks together. It's not just you're listening to the new Drake album and randomly Hotline Blings at the very end because more streams, more money. You know, the art of the album is missing in today's age. And I feel like this is a standout compared to a lot of other major artists and major Christian artists as well that really have that theme and hold on to it very well. There is a bonus track on Spotify, but that's just, bonus track. This really ends with the song Seasons, and it's the perfect ending to this song, or to this album, I should say. But what's your opinion on that? We've kind of touched a little bit on it in the last episode, but what's your opinion on the art of the album and that missing from modern day music making?
Yeah, I would have to agree that making albums cohesive is kind of a lost art. And I've always been more of an album listener. Like, I remember being younger and just like picking up like greatest hit CDs of a couple bands I liked, like a few different times. And because it was like, I like this artist and I like all the songs on this CD. And so I'll buy the CD. And then what would happen is I would find I would just never listen to the CD. Like, it would just, there's nothing wrong with it. I would just never listen to it. I've always been into albums. And so that's part of the reason why I think the previous album that we did, Dark Side of the Moon, was one of my favorites, is because it sort of defined for a whole generation, and I think subsequent generations, like what a cohesive album looks like. So I've always appreciated that. And this album definitely has a cohesion to it. It has a theme. It has like everything sort of feels like it progresses logically as you listen to it, which is kind of a lost art in today's age.
I also want to bring up just really quickly the prior album to this, Hard Love, released in 2016.
I was gonna comment on that too.
Oh yeah.
In like my overall thoughts, I had a note about that. I wrote down much better title than its predecessor, Hard Love. That's
Out of Body compared to Hard Love. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, that the environment. I'm a believer, and I try my best to not be dirty, but at times I just can't help myself. And that was one of those times. I was reading the Wikipedia article on this album, and I scrolled down and found the phrase "hard love," and I started laughing. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. But I also want to bring up the track number. I feel like depending on the theme of the album or how it flows together, you could get away. I think 10 is nearly perfect. Like Dark Side of the Moon, that's the perfect amount of tracks. It's also the perfect amount of tracks for an LP. You can just flip it over and you got 4 on this, 6 on that, or 5 on that, and 5 on that. It's kind of perfect. when albums get to like the 16 track range, or even 12, I'd say, is a little too much for me. Like one of my most favorite albums growing up, and this was just as a kid, it's thank God. I'm so glad I did not pick, because this was my first pick, was Ocean Eyes by Owl City. Super tech poppy, or mid 2000s a range. Dude, I'm so thankful to God I did not pick that album over this one, because I was like, oh no, this one, I didn't realize the connection I had to this when I was like thinking about your suggestion. I'm like, I don't know, Ocean Eyes by Owl City, but there's like zero cohesion in that album because it's just all of his EPs put together. There's no theme connecting all of them. Maybe Vanilla Twilight and Birds and the Bees, maybe, but other than that, that's about it. And that has 12 tracks, which I think is a good amount, but I feel like it can get over.
It overstays its welcome.
Overstays its welcome.
Yeah,
And
I feel like 12 is usually.
it's a little too much.
Is usually about the upper limit for me when I think of how many tracks an album should have. Like, obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. Like, there's been albums that are longer and have more tracks that they needed to for various reasons, but for most albums that are more straightforward, I would agree that 12 is where it's like, okay, no more than that.
Yeah, no more than that.
10 is kind of like the perfect number.
Yeah, and it's funny because that makes me think of like TV shows or something like that. Like I think of like a Disney Plus show, like a Marvel Disney Plus show, which is like 6 episodes, 45 minutes, here you go. When in reality, it's like the Obi-Wan show you and me were talking about, like. That was a 2-hour movie they took and chopped up into 6 parts.
Yeah.
Onto Disney Plus, which did not serve it at all in any light. It was actually a worse decision in my opinion. And for somebody who watched it, I know you didn't watch it, but thinking back on stuff like House of Cards, which is great. It's a great show, but 13-hour-long episodes, like full hour-long episodes is a little much. I could get down to 8 full hour-long episodes, which I think Stranger Things Season 4 did that. And each one was an insane amount of budget and overlong. Like each episode was like an hour and 10 minutes or maybe 58. And they kind of went a little overboard, but each one felt like a one part to a big movie. And 8 hours, I think, is just plenty of time to tell a very cohesive story that's not overly long. Give me like something like that versus something that's 13 at like hour long or 6 episodes at 45 minutes. There's you can play around with it and whatever the story justifies. But with albums, I feel like 8's a little too little because I kind of think of buying a CD and I'm like, oh, there's 8 on here. That's enough. But any less than that, I don't know if it's worth my money. Like just thinking about money wise.
Yeah, well, it also depends too.
Yeah.
Like
we're not in that age anymore, but I'm just saying.
Like 8 is one of those things. Like
there's some good albums with 8.
Like 8 tracks is fine. It's not too little. It's just that if an album has only 8 tracks, then it better not have any filler.
Yeah, exactly. Versus like 14, 16. You guys could have cut some of this stuff out. Save it for the next one,
Yeah, if I can forgive an album for having 1 or 2 skippable tracks, but then when it only has 8 tracks, then that's like, no.
Yeah, it's funny because even though I love pretty much every single track on this, I'll always skip like Alive and I think Survival and Riding High. So 3 out of the 11, which brings it down to like 8. So it's funny how that turns out. But I feel like stuff like Riding High, even Borrowing the Heartbreak, they did not need to include on this. I understand why. But at 11, it's just enough to be like, okay, there's enough here to listen to and enjoy, to work with. And I think, what is it? Hard Love had like, going back to Hard Love, I think it only had like 9. I could be wrong, but yeah, not the best title for an album for sure. It also had that song, David, that literally is called Happiness. Have you heard that? Like, oh, happiness.
Oh yeah, I've
with
heard
that Southern choir in the background,
Yeah. Another song that I hate with a burning passion.
Dude, K-Love and Air One. What is wrong with you guys? Stop playing that song. And play more Skillet, please, for the love of God.
That's why I don't listen to the radio. Radio stations are disappointing.
Yeah.
And, I was at work, sometimes we gotta go to like the outer buildings, and so we ride in the security van, and they put on the radio, and I've just noticed, because this is like the only time I ever listen to the radio in like recent, like in my current life, That's the only time I ever listened to the radio. And so it really struck me those times. It's like, man, there's way more commercials, or at least it seems like there's way more commercials and way less actual music on the radio than there was back when I listened to it. It's like, it's like sometimes it's like, now I'm like glad that I never listened to the radio anymore, because I'm like, I feel like if I intentionally put it on, I'd be like, why would I even why even bother? I put this on so I can hear like 3 songs and then like 20 minutes of commercials in between them. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like they play like 4 songs, and then you get like probably 5 minutes of commercials or something stupid like that. So stupid with 2 O's, as they say. So, but yeah, I feel like to cap the discussion off on like albums, I feel like indie artists are probably where that's going to come from. And it's cool to see people like Need to Breathe bring that through it. From one song to the next, they flow into the other. Not as good as Dark Side of the Moon, but this one was nice, where it was like you get Child Again into the album. That is the song that this album's named after, Out of Body, which let's get into next. I'll start off. I'll let you start, David. What did you think of Out of Body?
Okay, so yeah, I like the fade in. That was cool from the previous track. I felt this was interesting because instead of just hearing the singer's voice, they put a lot of like weird warbly effects on it. So it was like his voice was just part of the texture of the song, instead of being like a standout part of it, Like normally you have your lead vocals, and that's kind of like the centerpiece of the song. Where this, I liked where it was kind of like they covered the vocals and kind of during certain parts in kind of like the warbly weird effects. So it was like the vocals were just kind of part of the texture of the whole thing.
Yeah, you hear that.
And you just kind of, and it was just kind of like, it just like the lyrics and the music as a whole just kind of turned into one like sort of solid thing that just kind of washes over you, which is a cool effect. And then also I like the little melodic bass line in the breakdown.
Yeah.
I wish this album would have had like a lot more of that. But it's cool that they had one. It's cool that they had one.
And the melodic breakdown, can you explain?
So I'm talking about in the where the song breaks down, it just kind of like drops down, There's a little bass line in there where it slides up real melodically, and it sounds cool. And it's like,
where he says like far beyond vanity, like far beyond the vanity.
And no, the song stops.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Like the song, it literally just drops down.
Okay.
It just drops down to like almost nothing. There's a little break, it's a little break. And in that little break, you can hear the bass player just kind of slide up do a little nice melodic slide up from one note to the other. It really pops.
Okay.
It was cool. I wish there was more of that kind of thing, but it's cool that they had one moment where the bass player could like be audible.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's kind of perfect that Child Again leads into this song. After a track filled with writing about reshaping your perspective, this song is about what happens when we embrace that perspective, just looking at it that way. Man, this song's a banger, David. Man, this song gets you going, keeps its upbeat tempo as the lyrical salad wraps around your mind as you embrace it. The song exemplifies the perfect combination of Need to Breathe's musical talent as well as Baron Bow's frankly beautiful lyric writing. My favorite verse of the song is, "Far beyond the vanity, floating over everything, I can see the map I took to get here." Man, if it's not apparent enough, he's talking about your journey of life and all the choices you made along the way, separate from your flesh, looking at it from that spiritual point of view. God, it's so beautiful. I love it. David's just blinking at me over and over with a very judgmental look. I will move. I'll move forward.
I'm messing around.
I don't know. I think this and Child again kind of go hand in hand, and one's kind of more ethereal is what I would use to describe it, but this one is more like, okay, we're back into it, guys. Here we go. And it's just beautiful, and just you can tell it's written with. I'll say this: Need to Breathe's writing in all of their songs is a little bit strange, a little bit out there, very out there. In fact, in some cases,
I wouldn't describe it as out there at all.
How would you describe it?
It's very
interesting.
Normal. It's very
really?
Normal.
Really?
Yeah, it's not out there at all in my view.
Really?
I guess I have much.
I mean, he's no Depeche Mode, but
no, I have a much like more
expectation, or
like if I were to describe something as out there,
yeah,
it would. If I were to describe something as weird or out there,
okay,
it would be weirder and more out there than this.
Okay.
This does not cross the threshold for weird or out there for me.
Okay.
This, yeah, it's.
Well, I was just saying, like, maybe to the general public or something. Like, if you only listen to like the mainstream stuff, this is maybe a little.
I guess if you listen to Taylor Swift, this is probably a little bit.
Yeah, and
probably a little.
I don't know why we keep, going to Taylor Swift, but I think it's funny. Yeah. So, but there's something about Bear's voice. It's really. I'm not going to compare it to some legend like Jim Croce or something like that, or John Denver, but he has a unique sensibility to his voice, is what I'll say. I feel the same way about Adam Young, who does the Owl City songs. I feel like there's something pure about his voice that's very clear, even though it's mostly drowned out in synthesizer, and it sounds like he's 11 years old. Versus Bear sounds like a man, and I don't know. I just don't listen to enough music with that southern draw. That might be it. I just like his voice a lot.
I will, on the topic of his voice, I can bring in a comment from the outside world.
Okay.
Who said this?
yeah, Jake, you're in your own world. Here's the
No. I'm joking. It was Stephanie. Stephanie said this.
Okay.
Because I mentioned what we were doing as far as the format for the podcast for these couple episodes that we were doing to her, and she's like, "Need to Breathe? Who's that again?" And then she pulled up one of their songs on YouTube or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, it's that band. This guy's voice reminds me a lot of Kings of Leon." And a review of this album actually did compare the two. So okay. I don't know if you've ever listened. I've never listened to Kings of Leon.
Yeah, me neither.
So, but apparently out in the world, those two have been compared. So
yeah, it's funny because I feel like especially with Spotify and or Apple Music or something, if you find something, there's more like, it's funny how musical like behavior works throughout the years, at least for me. Like I go through and just listen to the same things over and over, and maybe I listen to something, I'm like, oh, that's cool, I'll grab that, and I'll grab this, and I'll do that, and that. It works beautifully with Spotify or Apple Music, whatever you use out there, but it doesn't work with YouTube Music. YouTube Music's just, it's not the best. It's really bad, honestly. I kind of hate using YouTube Music.
I don't use the YouTube Music app. but I listen to most of my music on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah, that's different. But in terms of managing playlists, the easeability to share it, like Spotify is superior in nearly every aspect of that. But YouTube Music has improved over the years. But during, I think 2020, when I was bouncing between Spotify and YouTube Music, because I had both of them, I still do. I was like really unimpressed with YouTube Music. Like all my downloaded songs just went to a downloaded folder, and I couldn't just bounce between playlists. I could download the playlist, but I had to download that separately from my downloaded songs. It made 0 sense. So that's my main issue with it. Plus, just usability is bad. If I'm just going to listen to like a long form, like playlist or maybe game music montage thing, I'll go to YouTube and pick up one of their 3-hour playlists somebody makes. Those are great. But if I'm going to dig deep in some music and put on a nice pair of headphones, I might go just to Spotify, or if I had Apple, I'd probably do that because that's better quality. Also, YouTube's kind of better quality too than Spotify. Spotify's the least. It gets the job done, but it's not like very extremely good.
Yeah.
In terms of listening quality.
I guess I don't really see the use case for Spotify for me because I'm never wanting curated playlists, like ever.
Yeah.
If I go to listen to music, I put on
you
what
boomer. No, I'm joking.
If I go to listen to music, I'm always putting on what I want to put on.
Yeah, I remember we were doing the LAN party, and I'm like, "Oh, David, make a playlist for the LAN party." And you're like, "Well, okay." And I was like, "Yeah." And then we turned on the playlist, and it was good. You got some good choices in there. We need to iron it out and really bring it to the forefront. Next is the next step. But I remember telling you that, and you're like, "Okay, I'll do what I can." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, thanks, bro." So never mind, you're good.
Yeah, like I said,
not
before,
your thing. Not
like I said before, I'm really an album oriented listener. So like,
I thought you were gonna say something else, but I'm not gonna repeat it.
So like, if like say I want to listen to Pink Floyd. Say I feel like Pink Floyd, I'm not going to go to Pink Floyd's channel on Spotify. I'm going to say, okay, which Pink Floyd album do I want to listen to? And I'm going to put that on.
Okay. Do you, what's that one you'll listen to that's like not, it's definitely European metal, which there is a lot of, but what's that one band you'll listen to? It has a weird, like, not German, not Rammstein, that's not what I'm talking about, but there's that one you listen to, and I'm like, oh, this is... When I never go out of my way to listen to it, but when you put it on, I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is good stuff.
I don't know.
It's like Chofsky, or starts with a TCH or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out later. All right, moving on. Track 7, Who Am I? I wrote a bunch of stuff for this, so I'm just going to dive right into it. This track comes off to me as a cry for help and a cry for thankfulness. The verse at the beginning is probably the most standout to me, and this is the lyric. Sometimes my bad decisions define my false suspicions. And this is what I wrote about I feel like this verse is powerful. The decision to have it be the first thing you hear after the first verse, and a moment with just the instrumental is a really nice touch. I love it because it truly speaks to the shame I've felt in the past with sin. The mistakes I've made and the immediate thoughts the enemy pushes afterward, making me ashamed of who I am and who I perceive myself to be while in sin or distress. The verse, my wounds and my past, was saying, no one should ever love me like you do, also echoes this thought, making me forget who I am in Christ, dealing with those thoughts, who God says I am, and the many promises the Father has for us in his instruction booklet. Although the Bible does say we are more than conquerors and we are his children, there are many things, I would say, in life when it comes to sin that really echo what that verse is talking about, and stuff that I've resonated with personally. And I feel that this song is really beautiful in that sense because it really is a cry out for love and thankfulness, saying, I'm so glad that not only I don't have to do this alone, but the fact that his mercy endureth forever. And the final thing I'll say on it is you can also interpret the song for a spouse or intended for a spouse or loved one. But honestly, the line where it says, "You grow roses on my barren soul," tells me that the singer is talking to God and not someone on earth. I think there's a lot you can say about this song. I remember going to the comments on this song on YouTube one time. It was just filled with people like, holy cow, this is powerful. It really resonates with my life, what I'm going through right now. And it's pretty much about identity. And I feel like in the song it's the struggle of staying centered. And that's really what this speaks to me. And I remember at this point in my life, that's what I was going through as well. So, but David, let's I want to hear what you think of Who Am I?
Yeah, this song, I didn't really have much to say about this song. It just, nothing in particular stood out to me, other than the one line, "Grow your roses on my barren soul." Like that one.
It's biblical, I'd say.
It's not biblical.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, wait, no. I meant, yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that line did stand out to me, and I was like, oh, that's a cool way to say it.
Yeah.
The idea of God creating something beautiful out of the barrenness of your bad choices. Yeah, that's a cool way to say that. So that stuck out to me. But other than that, I don't really have much thoughts on the song.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's an anthem. That sounds too cringy, honestly. It's more like, I don't know how to describe it. I feel like it can be taken a lot of, it can resonate with a lot of people, this song in particular, versus I think everything else. I think this and Banks specifically resonate. This Banks and Seasons, I feel like, can resonate with a lot of people in your walk of faith. And I feel like the inadequacy, insecurity you may feel in your life, really, you as an adult, you kind of just put it off to the side, but it's always, at least for me in this generation, it's always gnawing at the back of my head. And you really have to put it down, and you put it down with prayer and shifting your focus where it should be. And it's hard sometimes, because sometimes I just want to just chill out and enjoy my free time. But sometimes you have to be like, God, and spend some moments in prayer and time, and spend time with Him, most importantly. Even if it is spending your free time not how you would want to, maybe whether it is listening to the Bible or reading it, or even listening to a podcast or something that dives into that kind of thing. So I found a lot of The Deep End with Taylor Welch, which had the Timmy Alberino on that we listened to prepare for ours. His their podcast is really interesting, and I get a lot out of it. And I was listening to that the other night, and I'm like, man, there's some really good stuff about this. You know, they were talking about the promises of Daniel, and yeah, it's more like something you need to keep yourself fed in a world that's constantly trying to feed you everything else. So I think I'll leave it there at that. So let's go to track 8. Banks of the River. David, let's get it out of the way. Worst song of the album. Oh my God, it's so bad.
Yeah, I didn't. My only note for this song is the lyrics are really cringy.
I could see that. Yep.
That other than that, I was just like, meh. I don't have just like meh.
Not much you had to write on this one, huh? Is it the worst you'd say out of all of them for you? Riding High is like my least favorite out of this, honestly.
I would say that this one's Banks is my least favorite, just because the song doesn't really hit me in any particular way.
Yeah.
And the chorus lyrics about, him being the banks of the river for, I'm guessing, his wife or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, bleh.
David's no romantic. That's, but we love him anyways. Okay, so I'm so opposite of you, and I love this because it just shows our different tastes. So I wrote down this last night when I was listening to it. I'm like, ooh, yeah, like imagine me sitting at my desk with my keyboard, the monitors, headphones on, playing this on Spotify, and I'm like just tapping on my keyboard as the tune of the music's starting to play, and I'm like, ooh, and my first opening title is one of the best songs on the album. Another example of Bear and Nathan's excellent songwriting. The song sounds like something you'd listen to around a campfire. This song, which whatever that means, this track really is the anthem for every loving husband. Bear Reinhardt always has a song dedicated to his wife in every album, and this is that entry for Out of Body, and it's probably my favorite next to Seasons. Bear has stated that this album is mainly dedicated to his 3 sons, but it's also nice to get another love song in a non-secular way, more pure and authentic, from the perspectives of somebody who's actually been through it and been married for a while, versus some random upstart young Christian artist who's a newlywed and he's singing about his love for his girl that he's known for like a year. It's like, you see that in a lot of Christian music from what I can tell, with few exceptions. There's some Toby Mac stuff out there he's singing about his wife and I actually jive with, and I'm like, yeah, you get it, Toby, this is cool, you know, you and your girl you're cool. But anyway, we don't usually get a song from somebody who's approaching middle age and reminiscing about their love for their wife in a mature way that is really beautiful. And I feel like that's what really I took away from this song is, yes, it's a love song. Banks of the river. I get it. I was listening to their live album, Live in the Woods Volume 2. And after one of the songs, he says, yep, this one, my wife was like, when we got married, she said, remember, I'm the cage and you got to contain me, you know, or you're my cage that I'm surrounded by or whatever. You contain my crazy, you cage in my crazy, is what she said to him. And he's like, well, I've been spending years trying to figure out how to write a song about that without being weird or strange. And I found out Banks was a better way to say it and convey it. So I think it's cute. I think it's delightful. It's not the strongest lyrically. I think it's probably one of the weakest lyrically, if I'm looking at it from an objective point of view. But I just unabashedly love this song. I think it's super beautiful. You'll probably hear it at my wedding, David. I'll have to talk about the wife if she'll be willing to dance to it. Probably won't happen, but there's always hoping, you know. So that's what I think of Banks. It's delightful, is what I'd say. So David's giving me them eyes. So let's move on to the next one, track 9, Riding High. And David, I'll pass along to you for this one.
This one, Riding High. What do I have here? So I like the intro. I thought it was really cool sounding.
Yeah.
This track stood out to me. The guitar work is really active and like it stands out. Like you can tell what the guitarist is actually doing on this. I like the slide work. Very nice. Kind of gives it that southern sort of feel. I like how the drums are really crunchy sounding.
Yeah.
They're not super clean. They're like really just crunchy. It kind of gives it a different texture. And then the outro too, I really enjoyed. It was kind of like just this, it was like a soundscape almost. It kind of like the song just kind of broke apart into this, just like this, like ethereal sort of wave of sound that just kind of washes over you.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else on that one?
That's about it.
Okay. Yeah, this song makes me feel, or not makes me feel, it feels like Old Need to Breathe to me. And I really do enjoy my Old Need to Breathe, like when they first hopped on the scene. And again, some of that crunchy drums you'll hear on stuff on like Feet Don't Fail Me Now, other tracks like that throughout their discography. It reminds me about the albums The Heat, Daylight, and The Outsiders, bringing that Southern gospel and hospitality and warmth peppered all over the song, and I think some of the album as well. It's got a good beat, good lyrics. Not my favorite, but pretty good overall. Ooh, this is where me and you differ, David. I feel like the mixing at the end could have had just the vocals raised a little bit. I understand what they're going for. Point. I know. I understand that's not the point, but it feels like all the elements that come in at that ending part kind of just drown out the voice, compared to just everything else.
And that's a good thing.
Okay.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
That
was the intention.
The intention was for the vocals to melt into the rest of the instruments and just kind of everything just hits you as just sort of like a hazy sort of cloud of sound that just kind of like, it's almost like waves crashing on the shore. You see a wave coming up over the ocean, and it's a very defined thing. It has the part where it curls over, there's the crest, and then there's the part where it crashes down and it kind of like follows the shoreline as it crashes. And then when it hits the shore, it's just foam that just spreads out on the sand, and it's no longer has a defined structure. So this, I
wasn't really picking up what they were putting down, honestly, with that.
Yeah.
Ending.
So that's kind of what that's supposed to be, is just, it's supposed to be where the song has a defined structure. It's got the instruments and then the vocals on top of it. And then when the song ends, it's like a wave crashing on the shore, and it just breaks apart. And it's just a nice little foam of sound spreading out over the sand of your ear holes. That's kind of the point of it.
Okay. I guess I just wasn't picking it up, but yeah. So yeah, riding high. I think it's good. I think every song on this honestly is good in nature, like good as in general. This was just like my least out of all of them. Like maybe this and Alive, and
I mean this I think was my favorite. Ooh. Because this was like one of the only songs that had things in it that interested me.
All right.
Like the rest of the album,
I could see that too. Like, it is the most different out of all of the songs.
Yeah, the rest of the songs all sound very much like the same as each other. This one is like really different. So I think I enjoyed this one the best because it's not like the other ones.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so let's hop to number 10, Bottom of a Heartbreak. I'll start off with this one. I like the build up to this one in the beginning. It's pleasant, has a good start. The pre-chorus is also really good. Goes into the chorus really well, both lyrically and the flow wise. I dare say one of the most well-written songs on here, on the album. The material, the flow, the lyric breakdown, the intent, the talent all culminates really well into this song. This is also probably one I usually skip when going through the album. But looking at it like objectively, I feel like there's some real good merit to this song. And I think there's a lot to like about it. Even if I can't even though sometimes I don't pick up what they're putting down, So I would say pretty dang good overall. What do you think, David?
Let's see. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on this song, but it did the sort of like vinyl hiss in the intro. It like kind of like really struck me as like, wow, they're really trying to make this sound as like they take an album with like modern pop production and they're just really trying to dirty it up any way they can to hide that clean, on the grid modern pop core. Yeah. They're just trying to slather as much dirt and grime as they can on it, which to me is kind of
dirtying up pop,
Like it I feel like this album should have been more
dirty.
Should have been less disingenuous about what it was like, because it's very poppy, clean, on the grid. Everything is all nicely dialed in the way it needs to be for modern pop production. And but then it's like they want you to like think of it as rustic and rootsy and folksy and southern. So they're like, we got to hide the modern pop core that this album is built
It's
on.
built on, yeah.
And
built
we gotta,
around.
and so we gotta just like take this
throw some
bucket.
red dust over it.
Yeah, we just gotta take all this dirt and grime that we can and pour that over the top of it, and hopefully people will think it's rustic and rootsy. Which, like, I feel like this would have been better served just like, yes, let it be clean and keep the grime and the dirt as like a special effect on like a few tracks. You know, kind of a thing. Whereas this one, by the time I got to this song and I heard that like hiss in the intro of like a turntable playing a really old record.
Give you false hope?
Well, it wasn't, no, it was just like, I heard that hiss. I was like, oh, they put in digital record hiss on there. Someone on their computer loaded up a plugin that's like, you know, has a name like Warped Vinyl or something like that. And that's a software emulation of the hiss and the crackle you get from playing a really old warped vinyl record. And so I heard that, I'm like, that's when it hit me. It was like, man, they're really, really laying all that dirty stuff on thick. It's like they're trying to hide that this is like a modern pop album at heart or something, you know? And I felt like it was like, at that point, it was like, man, this is like a little much. I would have preferred it if it was like, if it just been clean and poppy for most of it, and then all the dirt and grime could have been saved as like a special effect for a couple of tracks. Instead, the dirt and grime and every single track, like there's so much that they do to try and make this feel like dirty and earthy and rustic. It's like, it's over the top for me.
I lament the digital insert of stuff like that when it comes to realization, at least. I don't realize that right away. Thank you for pointing that out. But I lament that kind of stuff because I'm like, come on, guys, get a microphone, get a shotgun mic, and go record an LP playing. Like, come on. Like, Foley work is an art form, and when it combined with like Dark Side of the Moon, like, it's a great example of a great set of elements coming together with that kind of Foley work. I mean, the clocks, I guess, stand out to me, and I don't really like the clocks, but that's an element that works in that song. It works, but it's not like, I feel like it takes a lot more work. Yeah. But that means there's more love put into it.
Well, yeah, and the clocks are just one example.
Just one
of all the various things on Dark Side of the Moon that they went out and recorded and then layered on top of the actual music. Like, they recorded having conversations with the studio staff. You know, they recorded
old people on the side of the street, you know?
Yeah, they recorded like coins being thrown into a bucket and cash registers opening and shutting, stuff like that. It's like they went out and found those sounds and sprinkled them in where they wanted to. Whereas this is kind of just, it does really what most modern albums do. Everything is just all digital.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much more texture that could be put into stuff like this. And if you have the budget and the studio, the only limit's your creative imagination. Like, I see stuff all over here. If you really put your mindset into what you can play with in terms of sound, like I see the knight helmet right above us in the studio, the samurai sword, the Nausicaa Valley of the Wind art book. You can do so much with just taking little things and then using digital to stretch things out or contort it or alter it in a way.
Yeah, and ultimately, too, it's modern music production is so streamlined.
Yeah.
Because time is money.
Yep.
So it's so much easier to load up a digital plugin that gives, you know, your vinyl hiss and crackle than trying to actually find a recording of, or make a recording of a turntable hissing and crackling and then add that into your song because, you know, the plugin's so much easier. You already got all your tracks in the software and you just click on a new track, click add plugin, go to your plugin that says warped vinyl or hiss and crackle or whatever it's called, and you click on that and you play with a couple of knobs and bam, you have your hiss for the intro.
Yeah. Are you saying you're going to have some of that authentic crunch, you know, in your album when you eventually release it to the public?
Oh yeah, in my album, yes, it's going to be all the weird crap you hear in my eventual album will be 100% the real thing. And that's not a guarantee, but
but it's a
nice thought.
It's a nice thought. Yeah.
It's what I'd like to do.
All right, so let's get to track 11, Seasons. Whew, wow. I'm going to let you go first because I got a lot to say about this song. But you go.
Seasons. Let's see. I liked that the mandolin makes an appearance.
Ooh.
I wish there was more of that in this album too. That's another thing. I heard the little moment of melodic bass in one of the other tracks, and I was like, man, I wish there was more of that in this album overall. And the mandolin was another thing. I was like, oh, that mandolin, it really works for what, like, the overall, it really adds something. I was like, man, I wish I had heard more of that. So that was one thing. And then let's see what else. Oh yeah. Yeah, the song turns out to be way more interesting too than I thought it was going to be. Like the intro, like when it kind of started up, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those generic kind of like sort of slow ballads, tender ballads that, you know, cap off the album or whatever. But as the song went along, it morphed into something a lot more interesting than that. So I appreciated that. And then, I also thought the lyrics were good. Again, they didn't speak to me like, you know, they didn't really
personal level.
They didn't really speak to me on like a deep level, but just I appreciated the overall message about, you know, just the dangers of rooting your life in, like, you know, things that are changeable, you know, like rooting, like I'm happy because my circumstances are good, or my identity is in the job that I do, or, you know, stuff that can change, you know, stuff that can change. And there's a real danger to trying to make the foundation of your life a changeable thing that could be pulled out from under you. So I really appreciated the overall message that this song brought.
Yeah, I share that too. I feel like during this time when I was listening to this song, it kind of like I listened to the whole album and then this song comes along. I didn't know it was the last one. I was just listening to it. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, I remember. Because during the time I was listening to this, our church went through their transitionary period, COVID happened, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stuff you could take away and apply it to your life during that time. But the seasons is during this period of my life is when I truly learned about the term seasons of life and how seasons come and go, and also relationships come and go. You're not meant to be with the same person the rest of your life, your entire life, I should say. Because even if you're married, when you get married is when that starts. And if it goes to the end of your life, to the death, then cool. But you're not meant to be with that person forever on earth. Even you had to build up to that, right? You weren't with them in the beginning of your life, right? So everything and every relationship is a season. You will, and in different forms. Like right now, you and me are roommates. That'll probably change one day. But we're going to appreciate the time we have together. And we'll probably still do the podcast, most likely. Absolutely, we're going to keep doing it. You know, even if I have to drive all night to your house, you know. But I feel like, oh God, this song, I'm going to say it. It's a masterpiece. Bear said this was the first song they wrote for the album, and in hindsight, it does set the mood for the rest of the soundtrack. This song also carries the same rhetoric as Bottom of a Heartbreak, climbing up a mountain or going up a mountain and having nowhere to go from there once you reach the top. Except maybe down, highs and lows, highs and lows. And I remember when I heard the highs and lows, I was like, that's what Nicole was talking to us about in church. And that was the first time I ever experienced something like that, where we would go through each week, the worship team and tech teamer and whoever else was there would be like, what was your high for this week? Your good, the good thing that happened. Or what was your low this week? The bad thing that happened. And making that connection really cemented in my mind, like, whoa, like, what am I trying to learn from this, you know? And I feel like it says, like, we're in for nasty weather and I'll ride it out with you. We won't be riding highs and lows like tides of ocean blow. Again, it could be a little cringy, but I feel like the writing is really, I feel like it's strong in this. Like, I don't think that it's made with malintent. I don't feel like it's made haphazardly. I feel like it's very uniquely Bear's and Bo's, his brother, Nathan and William. That's their nicknames. And I feel like, especially if you listen to stuff like White Fences from the Reckoning album they did, that song's powerful in the journey of life. And I feel like this echoes that same thing. And it just, like the verse, reviving all of the worry that made it hurt. Holy cow. I can count how many times, or I can't count how many times that happened to me. Like in my journey, like going back to a previous moment in my life and thinking about the build up to the hurt, or the build up or the hurt itself, or the worry that comes with a potential hurt that may happen, you know? And the verse, we can't decide if we are fallen because every single call is a chance. To realize we're dependent on the fate of our circumstance. It's like, that's a choice. It's a choice whether you are dependent on the fate of the circumstance, the end of a season, the beginning of another. It refers to exactly what you were talking about. Basing your hope and livelihood and reason to be happy on something that can shift in the sand. It's not a great idea. And that's why it's so important to stay centered in Christ and to really continue that walk and to continue to learn more about your relationship with the Father, because that's a foundation that won't ever go away. And I feel like this whole album even speaks from the heart, whether it is cringy at times, I will say. But I feel like it does come from a place of experience, of knowledge, and of somebody who's been through it, you know, through the highs and lows, through the marriage with the kids, and also who's been on tour and an artist for 20 plus years. And even sometime before that, I think he's speaking from experience, and I feel like their words, not to heed your whole life advice on, but to just take into consideration. And that's why I love this album so much. Is it gives me, I don't know, something to strive for in that sense. Not being musically gifted, but of where I'm at in my life and where I want to be. And that could be bad too sometimes, like, you know, like what we're talking about, shifting sands and ringing your hope on something like, oh, once I get married, it's going to be great. No, that's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to make it if you get to this place or the next. That's why it's really important to be appreciative of where you're at, even if it's a low point in your life or a high point in the season, because the walk you have with the Father during those times, the highs and the lows, really puts everything into perspective. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the concept of making it is kind of something that, if you're going to have if you're going to survive your Christian walk with your faith intact, I think the idea of making it, quote unquote, in this life needs to be discarded. You know, there's things you strive for, there's goals you want to achieve, there's milestones you want to hit in this life, sure. There's things you want to work for, but the idea that once you get to this particular place in life, or you work hard enough and are able to get this particular thing or whatever, that once you get there, you've made it somehow. Like that idea is not, that idea is kind of a recipe for disaster, in my opinion, because for us as Christians, us as believers, we both have made it already, and we won't make it until this life is over. You know, it's one of those interesting dichotomies. We have made it, in the sense that if you're in Christ, you're saved. Your sin's forgiven. You're a new creation. Everything was accomplished on the cross. So in that sense, you've already made it. So everything else in life just kind of flows from that. But there's also the idea too that, you know, we're no longer citizens of this world, we're citizens of heaven. So like the good things that we experience in life are not going to compare to the joys of spending eternity with God, you know? So it's like placing your hope in temporal things. You know, it doesn't satisfy. If you have God, then this life can't fulfill you. I mean, this life can't fulfill you regardless, but at least in the world you can sort of delude yourself into thinking that it's fulfilling. In Christ, all that is stripped away. And so sometimes, you know, people have little vestiges left over of that self-delusion, I think. And one of those little vestiges of delusion, I think, is the concept that if you get to a certain point in life, or you work hard enough for something, you will have, quote unquote, made it in this life, you know?
I think hinging is the word I would use. Like, you don't want to hinge your faith on something that, like you said, temporary, or your enjoyment. Like, oh man, I love Stanley Kubrick. Every film he does is just, it makes my happiest I've ever been. And then he dies. So it's like, okay, now what? He's not going to make any more films. You just have the creations he had and the terrible stories you hear about him on sets and everything. And it's like, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with like the wanting of making legacy. Like, oh, once I've done enough in this life, I can have my legacy remembered. Like, there's an obsession with, I would say, just people in general. You know, I was about to say men, but I'd say just people in general. Obsession of wanting to be remembered. It's tempting. It's extremely tempting to get into that kind of aspect of a mindset, I should say, of life. And I feel like it's unnecessary because, like you said, it's really about the walk. And I've known from my personal experience that walk has carried me further than any kind of certification, any kind of experience, any kind of moment that I've been a part of in my life. In fact, it's carried me more along than any relationship in my life, you know. And I think it's really beautiful in that sense because life is temporary, and that's the beauty, I think, of life. And I think that's the joke in the end of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know, where it's like, I don't know what joke that it would be, but it's like a joke in the end of Hitchhiker's Guide. It's like, oh, you'll die all eventually, you know, the universe has an end, you know, and we can't comprehend a forever, but that's not our job to comprehend. It's our job to have faith. So, yeah. That's really all I got to say. I think that got me all out everything I wanted to say about that. So, yeah. Final thoughts, David. Would you listen to another Need to Breathe album?
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned the 2 albums after this. So after this album, they actually sat down for 21 days straight in the studio and came up with like a bunch of songs. Like they actually put some songs from the writing sessions they had from this to the next one. And this one came out 2020. Into the Mystery, which is the follow-up to this, came out in 2021. Another full ass album. Like full album. I don't think it's as good as this. It may be. I don't really think so though. It's not as powerful, is what I'll say from just listening to it. And then in 2023, they had another release. So it's like, holy crap, like they were going. So it's also, I think that's also another beautiful thing about this is that they wrote Into the Mystery and Caves in like 2021 and then released them throughout the years. It's kind of interesting. So I would say that it's cool. Bear's an interesting guy. And I feel like he comes from a very authentic place. Whether his methods of music may not be, well, I don't know. I feel like if you're listening to pop and you like want to kind of take a little drug of country or southern, at least southern kind of taste, this would be your next step. And then just dive deep with something else, I guess. So I don't know. I wouldn't recommend the 2 albums after this, honestly. Like, neither to you or maybe the audience. I feel like this one's probably the best I've heard. I really do love The Outsiders. I feel like, The Reckoning. The Reckoning's really good, and The Outsiders. Hard Love's cool. There's like, it's okay, but like, there's only 2 really, really good songs on there.
And also, it's called Hard Love.
Yeah, I have an issue. I don't think that's a good title. I don't think that was the song that's called Hard Love of the. It's just so weird. I also have that randomly as an LP. Like I randomly got gifted Hard Love as an LP for my birthday one year, and I'm like, oh, this is like the 2nd record I own, and it happened to be this one. All right. So anyway, in terms of next week, so thank you audience again for listening to us in this episode of Snarp Fangle. I do want to say that we were intentionally going to be, this was going to be the end. This was going to be the end of peak analysis for now. And we're going to revisit later, probably in a different format. But next week, I feel like we're going to be revisiting some peak analysis as well with another album, but we'll see. We'll have to, that's a little teaser for what's happening next week. And that'll be the trilogy, and that'll cap off peak analysis for now until me and Lexi finally get around to review that game she's been wanting to talk about, which I still need to play. So anyway, with that, David, do you have any final words?
Let's see.
Yeah.
What did I have my final thoughts here written down.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, for this album was kind of an interesting listen for me because I didn't hate it because it is channeling a lot of different like indie folk kind of influences that were, stuff like I don't listen to a whole lot of indie music now, but there was a period in my life where I listened to a lot of like indie rock, indie folk stuff. I can hear a lot of those kinds of influences in this album, so I definitely enjoyed, revisiting those sounds a little bit. But then it was also like kind of like a weird like nightmare scenario where somebody took influences of a bunch of different things of a bunch of sounds that I listened to a lot during one time in my life and made like a modern pop record out of them, which is like I just can't stand modern pop. So it was kind of like a weird, it was weirdly bittersweet to listen to. It was like, oh, I recognize that sound and it's nostalgic to me. But then it's like, it's in the context of my least favorite form of music.
Christian music. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, and then also I think I talked about this before, but yeah, the whole like it's a modern pop album at heart. You know, someone made this and they snapped it to a grid. The vocals got auto-tuned. Like, everything is perfectly and digitally lined up exactly the way it needs to be according to the modern...
Like threshold.
The modern pop sensibilities.
Okay.
But then I guess they weren't proud of that or something or whatever. They're like, we need to slather as much rootsy, southerny, twangy, folksy sounding dirt over the top of this as we possibly can to make it sound like it's like, yeah, it's almost like they're like, we want people to think of, you know, like Leonard Skinner when they listen to it, but this is not a Leonard Skinner album.
No.
So like we gotta do a whole bunch of like production work to like make it have that impression, even though at heart it is not that at all. Is kind of the impression that I got of it, which, you know, it's strange. Like, I mean, I kind of appreciate it more that it's like that, because I mean, I'm never going to listen to it again, but like, for the experience that I did have listening to it, at least grappling with that weirdness provided it was interesting. Where, you know, it could have been utterly boring. Like, this album could have easily been the most bland, vanilla, boring piece of music to have ever been written.
Yeah.
It has that in its DNA. But somehow they managed to really wrangle some interesting creative decisions in there that made it a more standout experience for me, even though it's not my thing at all. So I will say that, because, you know, I also wrote that this sounds like the musical equivalent of Pumpkin Spice or millennial women who wear beige. To me, that
holy shit, David, what? Are you serious? Beige? At least burgundy. Like, come on, give us some credit.
No, I'm talking about a specific thing. You've seen millennial women who are like, their clothing and everything in their house is all
boring
beige
and bland.
No, it's not boring and bland. It's beige. Like, specifically the color beige. Like
it's a choice, but it's a very
that's a thing with they're like millennial women, for whatever reason. There's this trend of millennial women liking beige. Like, once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it.
Well, I can think of like purses and dresses and coats that are beige that I see people wear, and I see it a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of millennial women wear a lot of beige, and if you look at their houses and stuff like that, the way they decorate, there's also lots of beige in there too.
Especially the wall, the choice of paint color for the walls, I would say. That's a big avenue for beige.
I think it was actually a meme that first awakened me to this trend. It was like this like, you know, this like meme about like mother-daughter interactions like through the decades or whatever.
Sorry, I just realized I'm gonna have to go in back and edit this, and I'm not gonna cut out the shit I just said. I'm gonna keep it out there for the few times people hear me say it. So we're gonna. Pumpkin Spice, David. Seriously, that's Sabrina Carpenter, bro. Like, that is no. I don't know. Maybe you're correct. Maybe you are correct. Maybe there's a core of pop in this thing, and it's like, I'm just like, oh, look at the two layers, and you're like, yeah, Jake, but if you just look deeper, Jake.
This is the thing. It's like,
okay.
It's like, it's you know, it's like pumpkin spice that somebody like, you know, got some like pine needles and some gravel and some dirt, and they just poured it over the top of it. So it's like you have this cup full of
it's not like vanilla, but it's pumpkin spice.
You have this have this cup full of you take this cup and it's like, oh, this is a cup full of dirt and earth and grass and
It smells nice.
various things. But then you peel away that layer, and there underneath it is a pumpkin spice latte. But anyway, I do want to talk about the beige thing more. Okay. Because
go.
Once you see this, you will not unsee it.
Okay, I'm ready.
So my awakening moment was this meme. It was like little like meme about like mother-daughter relationships through the ages, and it was like all stick figure cartoons. And then when it got to the millennial mother with her children, like all the stick figures were beige. Like that was just like the one detail. Like all the other stick figures were all just black and white in all the other frames. And then when it got to the frame where it was like the millennial mother and her children, they were all beige. And then like in the comments section, everyone's just like, the beige children, I can't unsee the beige children. And then after I saw that, I started seeing it. Millennial women with lots of beige. And it's not every millennial woman.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them.
There is a lot of millennial women out there.
Well, I'm saying there's a lot of
millennial women that have beige.
That love beige for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing. And I think the reason why I put down pumpkin spice too is because I think millennial women who like beige are also the same types of millennial women who really love pumpkin spice. So this is like this is like
a theme.
This is like the musical equivalent of like that thing.
So like
it's a thing that I see
all the time.
It's a thing that I see all the time. There's a strain, there's a trend, and it's a very clearly defined thing. But it's not my thing. It's somebody's thing. It's other people's thing. It's just not my thing.
Yes. Okay, so let's get deeper with this. I'm sorry, but I need to understand a little bit more. If this is pumpkin spice with a bunch of grunge and dirt just poured on top, it's not infused with it, it's not mixed with it, it's just on top.
Yeah, it's just on top.
To kind of deceive you into thinking it's kind of southern and hip and kind of cool, you know? If it's pumpkin spice, Taylor Swift, let's not go say it. Let's just do, well, we know Taylor Swift. So let's go to Taylor Swift. Is she just pure vanilla bean at Starbucks? Like, what is she?
Yeah, Taylor Swift is like
a caramel latte, like just the basic
Taylor
biatch.
Swift is like the bottled Starbucks frappuccinos that you get from the convenience stores.
Sheesh.
You know, the ones that come in the glass bottles that just taste like real over-sugared coffee?
Yeah, I have an International Delight vanilla iced coffee with me right now. I understand what you're saying. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Taylor Swift is to me.
International Delight's more like cheap. Is like, Starbucks is so-called premium, but it's basically the same dang thing. It's coffee, sugar, and milk and cream.
Yeah, International Delight is like the more honest version of Starbucks.
Honestly, terrible for you, too.
Yeah, it's like...
this is pretty good. It's got pectin in it. That's the only thing.
Oh, yes. No.
Pectin and artificial flavors are the only bad things I see on this list.
You love some pectin. Love me some pectin.
Love me some pectin. Okay, so... I'm still not over this analogy, David. So, okay, pumpkin spice with dirt on it. Would you consider what's Monsters and Men? Of Monsters and Men? Because they're very folksy, independent, extremely independent from just their sound, I would say. What are they when you go to Starbucks? Are they the caramel frap? Are they the breve that you get that's more like infused with mint? Like, are they a breve? Are they infused with something because they're special? More care was taken. Are they double blended?
I don't know.
Do you feel the rocks are mixed in with the drink?
Monsters and Men is kind of a thing where I can't really speak to them because I've only heard a few of their songs.
10th Avenue North.
10th Avenue North. Oh, man, Matt's gonna hate me for this.
God, I'm so sorry, Matt.
10th Avenue North is 10th Avenue North to me
no.
is like the pumpkin spice latte
Oh!
without the dirt on top.
Oh!
Without the dirt on top. It's neither worse nor better.
It's still pumpkin spice.
It's still pumpkin spice. It's just, you know, you're getting a pumpkin spice latte. You know, with this one, it's like they're trying to sell you a floral arrangement, but beneath, you know, there's dirt, there's rocks, there's grass.
Bunch of stuff that gets in the way. You know, I mean, that kind of adds texture.
This album is like they're trying to sell you like a potted plant, but you remove the top layer and it's just pumpkin spice latte underneath, you know? Like,
okay.
10th Avenue North for me is like, it's still pumpkin spice.
It's still a blended drink, you know?
It's still pumpkin spice, but you know it's pumpkin spice. So whether that's worse or better would really depend on your own personal point of view. To me, it's less about worse and better and more just different.
Okay, I have one more example I need to bring up. One more. Or maybe two. I don't know. I want to see how far we can go. But I just want to get your opinion on this. Okay. We've holed off on long enough, David, for in this podcast, in the saga of Snarp Fangle. We dare not mention it even on the spiritual episodes we do with Thad. We were very careful in that sense. But let's go and talk about Bethel music. Where is that in your kind of criteria here? Because we're getting more into actual worship music. So where's Bethel music in that?
Music.
I'm looking at like the holy song. I'm looking at maybe not praise. That's a little too poppy for me, but Bethel music in general.
Bethel music in general.
Where are we at?
To me,
talking mint?
Talking
creme de la creme?
To me, it's not pumpkin spice, but it's you know, it's a sweet blended beverage. It's
better than vanilla.
Like it has its own flavor. So it's not, you know, it's like
a peppermint, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe peppermint with maybe some infusion of like a berry or something.
Like it's in that
it's same. Not too special.
It's in that same sort of category in that it's Bethel music is just, it's modern pop music. Some of their older stuff was a little more rocky, a little harder hitting, but as of late, their music is all very poppy, but it's a different kind of thing. Like the hallmarks are there, but it's not the same as other pop music. And also, like, I don't even like listen to worship music in the same way that I listen to other types of music, because I'm not like, if Bethel weren't worship music, if Bethel music was just like, you know, like the light, like, you know, just fueled from the life experiences of one person in the way that Need to Breathe kind of is, you know, the lead vocalist, like his life and his emotions and everything he's going through kind of like comes out, and that's kind of like the core of the music, you know? So if Bethel music were like that, like all the songs sounded the same, but instead of lyrics about worshiping God, it was just lyrics that were like, just, you know, came out of, you know, were just personal to the person who wrote them, kind of a thing. I probably wouldn't even take the time to listen to them. So, but because it's worship music, because I'm involved in, have been and am involved in, and have been involved in music ministries and churches for a long time now, like worship music is kind of like my trade almost. I don't make money doing it, but it's kind of like it's not, it's kind of like a profession in the sense that I devote a lot of time and energy into doing it. And so, but because it's for the purpose of leading people in corporate worship to God. So I don't critique the music in the same way. I don't think of it in the same way. Like the only things I think about Bethel songs personally in terms of what they're like, is like how enjoyable, how like
Are
is
you
it
talking
in,
about how enjoyable they are together as a corporate body, or
no. So it's like when I think of if you ask me to tell you how enjoyable a Bethel music song is, I'm not going to tell you how enjoyable it is from the perspective of I put it on and listen to it. I'm going to tell you how enjoyable it is from the perspective of how enjoyable is it for me to play that song in a church.
Okay. Gotcha.
So like, I don't think about things like Bethel and Hillsong and other like worship artists in terms of whether I like their albums or not. I just think of them in terms of, do they serve the purposes do they serve my purposes as a worship leader? Do the lyrics say things that I want to lead people in congregationally singing? Is it a song that people can really get into singing congregationally? Is it a song that I'll be able to, flow in when I'm performing like the instrument parts or whatever,
Okay, so final thing. I have to ask because the audience is going to be wondering. So we've established worship is kind of its own thing. We'll critique it in a different way. Let's get back real quick. Pink Floyd, David, what are they?
And what are they in relation to
the coffee drinking
the coffee drinks?
Coffee drinks.
Oh, that's like
that. Yeah. What is it? Is it a specialty made like espresso? That you watered the filter already and then you dumped out the excess water and now it's just a wet filter to put fresh grounded coffee in.
Yeah, Pink Floyd to me, it's
special.
That's like, yeah, to me personally it's a special thing. It's like the perfect shot of just pure espresso that somebody put a lot of care and attention into, use the highest quality coffee, kind of a thing. Wow. But that's my that's just because I wouldn't say Pink Floyd in general is that, but the Pink Floyd albums that I enjoy are that.
I want to ask you more, but we're going to have to pause it there because I feel like we should say that for like legit its own topic. Like once we get next week's guests in here, I feel like we could test that out even further. Like I want to know Toby Mac. I want to know Elevation Worship. I want to know Ren Collective. Like I want to know all of them, man. I know Ren Collective is going to be like basic vanilla probably for you. But what would you put Ren Collective at? I want to know.
Ren Collective, what there used to be more interesting.
Yes, I agree. Especially that first album.
My first exposure to them was actually seeing them live in a live in concert. They were like an opening act for some other Christian artists that I think it was a youth group function, but maybe it wasn't. I don't remember. It was some Christian artist that I went with other people to see, and Ren Collective was kind of like a small unknown act at that point, and they were kind of like the openers for the more well-known artists that were the headline acts of the night. And so they really, their music isn't like so far out of the ordinary where it's like, oh wow, this is like so weird and out of the different. I mean, it's still pretty straightforward, but it was different enough that it caught my attention, kind of a thing. And then at a certain point, they, instead of continuing in their journey of being different, which they could have had, they instead seem to regress and like become less interesting and less different after a certain point. So that was kind of like Ren Collective's like a disappointment whenever I think about it. Because like they had their early music.
There's some to it.
It had potential.
Yeah, it's really
as
good.
like I felt like if they had just continued, if they had like
stayed true
or not
to
stayed,
that Irish, you know,
if they're like if they had really like if they had like committed to a path of doing interesting different things, like if they had progressed in how different and how interesting they were, they could have really been something, in my opinion. But instead they sort of had the opposite. They had like a backwards evolution.
Yeah, I would say I had never heard their first album, but which is called, at least on Spotify. I think there's maybe one before this, but at least on Spotify from what I'm looking at here, which doesn't always have their very first ones, but for different artists. But anyway, it says Organic Family Hymnal. I never heard anything, I think, from that album, but the second one was where they did Build Your Kingdom Here, which got them huge. And I liked that album a lot, the Homemade Worship by Homemade People album, which is very pretentious, if I may say, of a title. But
I mean, yeah, it is a pretentious title, but also
they had some really good stuff.
It kind of spoke to their ethic, their sort of the way they did things, because what struck me about them, seeing them live, wasn't necessarily that their music sounded groundbreaking or, you know, it's unlike anything I've ever heard before.
Yeah, no.
Like the music is
it's
like
not incredibly special.
The music was like just different enough.
Just different enough, yeah.
But like what really struck me about them, seeing them in concert, was just like everything they did was like their whole setup was just like they were essentially like just rocking out, playing these like weird homemade instruments, and like like they had this very like their them as like in a whole package, like just the way they performed and stuff was very unique. Like they put on like they actually put on a show.
Yeah, they do. That's one that like we've taken the youth group several times to go see them. I think in Roseville, and they just play at a very sort of small church. Like it holds, I think, 200 something people, and that's always been super fun and a really good time. And they always make an effort to just be fun, have a good time, and to be mostly entertaining. But you get that also that really raw. At least for me, like the Holy Spirit has been there whenever I've seen them. And they do a good job at that. But dude, yeah, like True Intimacy, Desert Soul, Build Your Kingdom Here, You Are My Vision. There's a lot of Alabaster is on the Homemade Worship album. There's a lot of good ones on there. But before we end, I'm going to end it. But David, I was just texted the album choice of our guest's choice for next week.
No, nice.
I'm going to show it to you right now, but I don't want you to spoil it.
Of course.
But I want to see what your excitement level is out of 10. So I'm going to pass it over to you. So here's their choice, his choice.
I've never listened to this.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't Yeah, my reaction to this is nothing. I don't have any expectations.
Yeah, me neither. I have no idea what to expect. It's a live album, it looks like, but I'm excited to listen to it. And you should too.
I mean, yes. Yes, of
yes,
course.
you know, I meant to say the audience, but yes, you too.
Okay.
But yes, you too, the audience.
I mean, they can't listen to it until they know what it is.
Until they know what it is, yeah. But you, audience,
when you know what it is, then go listen to it.
Yeah, so anyway, thank you for listening to yet another episode of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. If you want to message us, snarpfanglepod@gmail.com. And we will see you next time. Hopefully more interesting intrigues from David's musical picks. And the next peak analysis next week, which you're either going to hit skip on the playlist to hit listen to next, or you're going to have to wait a week as of us recording. So anyway, have a good day. We'll see you later. And remember to snarp fangle on.
Bye-bye now.